Wunderpants by Paul Jennings. My dad is not a bad sort of bloke. There are plenty who are much worse. But he does rave on a bit, like if you get muddy when you're catching frogs, or rip your pants when you're building a tree hut. Stuff like that. Mostly we understand each other, and I can handle him. What he doesn't know doesn't hurt him. If he knew that I kept Snot, my pet rabbit, under the bed, he wouldn't like him, so I don't tell him. That way he's happy, I'm happy, and Snot is happy. There are only problems when he finds out what has been going on. Like the time I wanted to see Mad Max 2. The old man said it was a bad movie. Too much blood and guts. It's too violent, he said. But Dad, that's not fair. All the other kids are going, but the only one at school who hasn't seen it. I went on and on like this. I kept nagging. In the end he gave in. He wasn't a bad old boy. He usually let me have what I wanted after a while. It was easy to get around him. The trouble started the next morning. He was cleaning his teeth in the bathroom, making noises, humming and gurgling, that sort of thing. Suddenly he stopped. Everything went quiet. Then he came into the kitchen. There was toothpaste all round his mouth. He looked like a mad tiger. He was frothing at the mouth. "What is this?" he said. He was waving his toothbrush about. "What's this on my toothbrush?" Little grey hairs were sticking out of it. "How did these hairs get on my toothbrush? Did you have my toothbrush, David?" He was starting to get mad. I didn't know whether to own up or not. Parents always tell you that you own up, then they will let you off. They say they won't do anything if you're honest. No punishment. I decided to give it a try. "Yes," I said. "I used it yesterday." He still had toothpaste on his mouth. He couldn't talk properly. "What are these little grey hairs?" he asked. "I used it to brush my pet mouse," I answered. "Your what?" he screamed. "My mouse." He started jumping up and down and screaming. He ran around in circles, holding his throat. Then he ran into the bathroom and started washing his mouth out. There was lots of splashing and gurgling. He was acting like a madman. I didn't know what all the fuss was about. All that yelling, just over a few mouse hairs. After a while he came back into the kitchen. He kept opening and shutting his mouth as if he could taste something bad. He had a mean look in his eye. Real mean. "What were you thinking?" he yelled at the top of his voice. "Are you crazy or something? Are you trying to kill me? Don't you know mice carry germs? They're filthy things. I'll probably die of some terrible disease." He went on and on like this for ages. Then he said, "I don't think you're going to see Mad Max 2. You can sit at home and think how stupid it is to brush a mouse with someone else's toothbrush." I went back to my room to get dressed. Dad didn't understand about that mouse. It was a special mouse, a very special mouse indeed. It was going to make me a lot of money. $50, in fact. Every year there was a mouse race at Smith's barn. The prize was $50, and my mouse, Swift Sam, had a good chance of winning. But I had to look after him. That's why I brushed him with the toothbrush. I knew that Swift Sam could beat every other mouse, except one. There was one mouse I wasn't sure about. It was called Mugger. It was owned by Scrag Murphy, the toughest kid in town. I'd never seen his mouse, but I knew it was fast. Scrag Murphy fed it on a special diet. That is what I was thinking about as I dressed. I went over to the cupboard to get a pair of underpants. There weren't any. "Hey, Mum," I yelled out. "I'm out of underpants." Mum came into the room, holding something terrible. Horrible. It was a pair of homemade underpants. "I made these for you," she laughed. "I bought the material at the op shop. It was just the right amount of material for one pair of underpants." "I'm not wearing those," I told her. "No way, never." "What's wrong with them?" said Mum. She sounded hurt. "They're pink," I said. "They've got little pictures of fairies on them. I couldn't wear them. Everyone would laugh. I'd be the laughing stock of the school." Underpants with fairies on them and pink. I nearly freaked out. Thought about what Scrag Murphy would say if he ever heard about them. I went red just thinking about it. Just then, Dad poked his head into the room. He still had that mean look in his eye. He was remembering the toothbrush. "What's going on now?" he asked in a black voice. "Nothing," I said. "I was just thanking Mum for making me these nice underpants." Pulled on the fairy pants and quickly covered them up with my jeans. At least no one else would know I had them on. That was one thing to be thankful for. The underpants felt strange. They made me tingle all over. My head felt light. Something not quite right about those underpants. And I'm not talking about the fairies. I had breakfast and went out to the front gate. Pete was waiting for me. He's my best mate. We always walk to school together. You got your running shoes? He asked. Oh no, I groaned. I forgot. It's a cross-country race today. I went back and got my running shoes. Came back out walking very slowly. I was thinking about the race. I'd have to go to the changing rooms and get changed in front of Scrag, Murphy and all the other boys. They'd laugh their heads off when they saw my fairy underpants. We walked through the park on the way to school. There was a big lake in the middle. Let's chuck some stones, said Pete. Who can throw the furthest? I didn't even answer. I was feeling sick in the stomach. What's the matter with you? He asked. You look like death warmed up. I looked around. There's no one else in the park. Look at this, I said. I undid my fly, showed Pete the underpants. His eyes bugged out like organ stops. Then he started to laugh. He fell over on the grass and laughed his silly head off. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He really thought it was funny. Some friend. After a while, Pete stopped laughing. You poor thing, he said. What are you going to do? Scrag, Murphy and the others will never let you forget it. We started throwing stones into the lake. I didn't try very hard. My heart wasn't in it. Hey, said Pete. That was a good shot. Went right over to the other side. He was right. The stone had reached the other side of the lake. No one had ever done that before. It was too far. I picked up another stone. This time I threw as hard as I could. The stone went right over the lake and disappeared over some trees. Wow, said Pete. It's the best shot I've ever seen. No one can throw that far. He looked at me in a funny way. My skin was tingling. I feel strong, I said. I feel as if I can do anything. I went over to a park bench. It was a large concrete one. I lifted it up with one hand, held it high over my head. I couldn't believe it. Pete just stood there with his mouth hanging open. He couldn't believe it either. I felt great. I jumped for joy, sailed high into the air. I went up 3 meters. What a jump! Yelled Pete. My skin was still tingling, especially under the underpants. It must be the underpants, I said. Underpants are giving me strength, I grinned. But they're not underpants, they're Wunderpants. Super jocks, said Pete. We both started cracking like a couple of hens. We laughed until our sides ached. I told Pete not to tell anyone about the Wunderpants. We decided to keep it a secret. Nothing much happened until the cross-country race that afternoon. All the boys went to the changing room to put on their running gear. Scrag Murphy was there. I tried to get into my shorts without him seeing my Wunderpants, but it was no good. He noticed them as soon as I dropped my jeans. Ha ha! He shouted. Look at baby britches. Look at his fairy pants. Everyone looked. They all started to laugh. How embarrassing. They were all looking at the fairies on my Wunderpants. Scrag Murphy was a big fat bloke. He was really tough. He came over, pulled the elastic of my Wunderpants. Then he let it go. Ow, I said, cut it out, that hurts. What's the matter, little diddums, he said. Can't you take it? He shoved me roughly against the wall. Wasn't going to let him get away with that, so I pushed him back. Just a little push. He went flying across the room and crashed into the wall on the other side. I just didn't know my own strength. That little push had sent him all that way. Must have been the Wunderpants. Scrag Murphy looked at me with shock and surprise that soon turned into a look of hate. But he didn't say anything. No one said anything. They were all thinking I was going to get my block knocked off next time I saw Scrag Murphy. About 40 kids were running in the race. We had to run through the countryside, following markers that had been put out by the teachers. It was a hot day, so I decided to wear a pair of shorts, but no top. As soon as the starting gun went off, I was off like a flash. I had kept my Wunderpants on, and they were working really well. I went straight out to the front. I'd never run so fast before. As I ran along the road, I passed a man on a bike. He tried to keep up with me, but he couldn't. Then I passed a car. This was really something. This was great. I looked behind. None of the others were in sight. I was miles ahead. The trail turned off the road and into the bush. I was running along a narrow track in the forest. After a while I came to a small creek. It was hot, so I decided to have a dip. After all, the others were a long way behind. I had plenty of time. I took off my shorts and running shoes, but I left the Wunderpants on. I wasn't going to part with them. I dived into the cold water. It was refreshing. I lay on my back looking at the sky. Life was good. These Wunderpants were terrific. I'd never get scared of Scrag Murphy while I had them on. Then something terrible started to happen. Something terrible. The Wunderpants started to get tight. They hurt. They were shrinking. They were shrinking smaller and smaller. The pain was awful. I had to get them off. I struggled and wriggled. They were so tight that they cut into my skin. In the end I got them off, and only just in time. They shrank so small that they would only just fit over my thumb. I had a narrow escape. Could have been killed by the shrinking Wunderpants. Then I heard voices coming. It was the others in the race. I was trapped. I couldn't get out to put on my shorts. There were girls in the race. I had to stay in the middle of the creek, in the nude. It took quite a while for all the others to run by. They were all spread out along the track. Every time I went to get out of the pool, someone else would come. After a while, Pete stopped at the pool. "What are you doing?" he said. "Even super jocks won't help you win from this far back." "Keep going," I said. "I'll tell you about it later." I didn't want to tell him that I was in the nude. Some girls were with him. Pete and the girls took off along the track. A bit later, the last runner arrived. It was Scrag Murphy. He couldn't run fast. He was carrying too much weight. "Well, look at this," he said. "It's little fairy pants. And what's this we have here?" I picked up my shorts and my running shoes from the bank of the creek. Then he ran off with them. "Hey, come back!" I screamed. "Bring those back!" He didn't notice. He just laughed and kept running. I didn't know what to do. Didn't have a stitch of clothing. Didn't even have any shoes. I was starting to feel cold. The water was freezing. I was covered in goosebumps and my teeth were chattering. In the end, I had to get out. Otherwise, I would have frozen to death if I'd stayed in the water any longer. I went and sat on a rock in the sun and tried to think of a way to get home without being seen. It was all right in the bush. I could always hide behind a tree if someone came. But once I reached the road, I'd be in trouble. And I just couldn't walk along the road in the nude. Then I had an idea. I looked at the tiny underpants. I couldn't put them on, but they still might work. I put them on over my thumb and jumped, but it was no good. It was just an ordinary small jump. Picked up a stone and threw it. Only went a short way, not much of a throw at all. The pants were too small, and it was my weak old self again. I lay down on the rock in the sun. Ants started to crawl over me. Then the sun went behind a cloud. It started to get cold. But I couldn't walk home, not in the raw. I felt miserable. I looked around for something to wear. There was nothing, just trees and bush and grass. I knew I'd have to wait until dark. The others would have all gone home by now. Pete would think I'd gone home. My parents would think I was at his place. No one was going to come and help me. I started to think about Scrag Murphy. He was going to pay for this. I'd get him back somehow. Time went slowly, but at last it started to grow dark. I made my way back along the track. I was in bare feet and kept standing on stones. Branches reached out and scratched me in all sorts of painful places. Then I started to think about snakes. What if I stood on one? There were all sorts of noises in the dark. The moon had gone in, and it was hard to see where I was going. I have to admit it, I was scared. Scared stiff. To cheer myself up, I started to think about what I was going to do to Scrag Murphy. Boy, was he going to get it. At last I came to the road. I was glad to be out of the bush. My feet were cut and bleeding, and I hobbled along. Every time a car went by, I had to dive into the bushes. I just couldn't let myself get caught in the headlights of cars. I wondered what I was going to do when I reached town. There might be people around. Broke off a branch from a bush and held it in front of my you-know-what. It was prickly, but it was better than nothing. By the time I reached town, it was late. There was no one around, but I had to be careful. Someone might come out of a house at any minute. I ran from tree to tree and wall to wall, hiding in the shadows as I went. Lucky for me, the moon was in. It was still very dark. Then I saw something that gave me an idea. A phone box! I opened the door and stepped inside. A dim light shone on my naked body. I hoped that no one was looking. I had no money, but Pete had told me that if you yell into the earpiece, they can hear you on the other end. It was worth a try. I dialed our home number. Dad answered. "Yes," he said. "I'm in the nude," I shouted. "I've lost my clothes, and help, help, help." "Hello? Who's there?" said Dad. I shouted at the top of my voice, but Dad just kept saying hello. He sounded cross. Then I heard him say, "Oh, it's probably that boy up to his tricks again." He hung up the phone. I decided to make a run for it. It was the only way. I dropped my bush and started running. I went for my life. I reached our street without meeting a soul. I thought I was safe, but I was wrong. I crashed right into someone and sent them flying. It was old Mrs. Jeeves from across the road. "Oh, sorry," I said. "Gee, I'm sorry." I started to help her up. She was a bit short-sighted and it was dark. She hadn't noticed that I didn't have any clothes on. Then the moon came out. The blazing moon. I tried to cover my nakedness with my hands, but it was no good. "Disgusting!" she screeched. "Disgusting! I'll tell your father about this." I ran home as fast as I could. I went in the back door and jumped into bed. I tried to pretend that I was asleep. Downstairs, I could hear Mrs. Jeeves yelling at Dad. Then the front door closed. I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. Well, I really copped it. I was in big trouble. Dad went on and on. "What were you thinking of, lad? Running around in the nude, losing all your clothes. What will the neighbours think?" He went on and on like that for about a week. I couldn't tell him the truth. He wouldn't believe it. No one would. The only ones who knew the whole story were Pete and me. Dad grounded me for a month. I wasn't allowed out of the house except to go to school. No pictures, no swimming, nothing. No pocket money either. It was a really bad month. Really bad indeed. At school, Scrag Murphy gave me a hard time. He called me Fairy Pants. Everyone thought it was a great joke, and there was nothing I could do about it. He was just too big for me, and his mates were all tough guys. "This is serious," said Pete. "We have to put Scrag Murphy back in his box. They're starting to call me friend of Fairy Pants now. We have to get even." We thought and thought, but we couldn't come up with anything. Then I remembered the mouse race in Smith's barn. "We'll win the mouse race," I shouted. "It's in a month's time. We can use the next month to train my mouse." "That's it," said Pete. "The prize is $50. Scrag Murphy thinks he's going to win. It will really get up his nose if we take off with the prize." I went and fetched Swift Sam. "He's pretty small," I said, "but he's fast. Bet he can meet Murphy's mouse. It's called Mugger." We started to train Swift Sam. Every day after school we took him around a track in the backyard. We tied a piece of cheese on the end of a bit of string. Swift Sam chased after it as fast as he could. After 6 laps we gave him the piece of cheese to eat. At the start he could do 6 laps in 10 minutes. By the end of the month he was down to 3 minutes. "Scrag Murphy, look out," said Pete with a grin. "We're really going to beat the pants off you this time." The day of the big race came at last. There were about 100 kids in Smith's barn. No adults knew about it. They probably would have stopped it if they knew. It cost 50 cents to get in. That's where the prize money came from. A kid called Tiger Gleason took up the money and gave out the prize at the end. He was the organiser of the whole thing. Scrag Murphy was there, of course. "It's in the bag," he swaggered. "Mugger can't lose. I fed him on a special diet. He's the fittest mouse in the country. He will eat Swift Sam. You just wait and see." I didn't say anything, but I was very keen to see his mouse. Mugger. Scrag Murphy had it in the box. No one had seen it yet. "Right," said Tiger. "Get out, you mice." I put Swift Sam down on the track. He looked very small. He started sniffing around. I hoped he would run as fast with the other mice there. He hadn't had much match practice before. Then the others put their mice on the track. Everyone except Scrag Murphy. He still had Mugger in the box. Scrag Murphy put his hand in the box and took out Mugger. He was the biggest mouse I'd ever seen. He was at least 10 times as big as Swift Sam. "Hey," said Pete, "that's not a mouse, that's a rat. You can't race a rat, that's not fair." "It's not a rat," said Scrag Murphy in a threatening voice. "It's just a big mouse. I've been feeding it up." I looked at it again. It was a rat, all right. It was starting to attack the mice. "Well, take a vote," said Tiger. "All those that think it's a rat, put your hands up." He counted all the hands. 50, he said. "Now, all those who say that Mugger's a mouse, put your hands up." He counted again. 52. "Mugger's a mouse." Scrag Murphy and his gang started to cheer. He'd brought all his mates with him. It was a put-up job. "Right," said Tiger Gleason. "Get ready to race." There were about 10 mice in the race. Or should I say 9 mice and 1 rat. 2 rats if you counted Scrag Murphy. All the owners took out their string and cheese. "And go!" shouted Tiger Gleason. Mugger jumped straight onto the little mouse next to him and bit it on the neck. The poor thing fell over and lay still. "Boo!" yelled some of the crowd. Swift Sam ran out to the front straight away. He was going really well. Then Mugger started to catch up. It was neck and neck for 5 laps. First Mugger would get in front, then Swift Sam. Everyone in the barn went crazy. They were yelling their heads off. By the 6th lap, Mugger started to fall behind. All the other mice were not in the race. They'd been lapped twice by Mugger and Swift Sam. But Mugger couldn't keep up with Swift Sam. He was about a tail behind. Suddenly, something terrible happened. Mugger jumped onto Swift Sam's tail and started grabbing it in his teeth. The crowd started to boo again. Even Scrag Murphy's mates were booing. But Swift Sam kept going. He didn't stop for a second. He just pulled that great rat along after him. It rolled over and over behind the little mouse. Mugger held on for grim death, but he couldn't stop Swift Sam. "What a mouse!" screamed the crowd, as Swift Sam crossed the finish line, still towing Mugger behind. Scrag Murphy stormed out of the barn. He didn't even take Mugger with him. Tiger handed me the $50. Then he held up Swift Sam. "Swift Sam is the winner," he said. "The only mouse in the world with his own pair of fairy underpants."